Do you ever just look at your books and feel nothing? Like you want to read, but your brain is foggy, your focus is gone, and even your favorite authors just don't feel the same anymore. And that means that you might be in a reading slump. And I've been there as well. And I feel like every reader at some point during their reading journey has been there. So today we're talking about how to gently get back into reading, how to gently get out of a reading slump without guilt, without pressure, just cozy vibe and some good book recommendations. Hi everybody, welcome back to another video, welcome back to my channel. My name is Caroline and thank you for being here. If this is the first time that you've seen my face, then hi, welcome to the fam. I am a full-time student on campus, but also somebody who loves reading and content creation, and so my entire personality trait is trying to incorporate those two things together and somehow make it work with my very busy, hectic 9-to-5 schedule. So if you're somebody like me with a very busy schedule but still wants to read and loves books and get back into reading, then I think you would really benefit from my videos, my channel, and the content I produce. If that's the case, then please give me a subscribe, give me a follow, give me a comment, give me a share, you know the drill. But today's video is for everybody out there who's in a reading slump, who is in a bit of a brain fog episode, who recently has not been feeling like reading or has not been enjoying reading as much as you would like to. We're going to be talking about how to identify and how to know when you're in a reading slump. Some of my gentle, comforting ways to help you ease out of a reading slump. And finally, I'm gonna give you some book recommendations that never fail to drag me out of a reading slump and bring me back to my normal self who just loves reading and really enjoys reading. And also, if you've been wanting to do a bit of a reset, which I think can be very beneficial, especially if you're in a reading slump, then you could either do a 24-hour readathon or a reading staycation, and both the videos for those two things are already up on my YouTube channel. I'm gonna link them somewhere either up here or in the description, so please check them out if you feel like you need a bit of a heads up start or a jump start. Without further ado, let's get straight into the video. Okay, let's just start with the symptoms, because sometimes you don't even realize that you're in a reading slump. You just know that you're in this very weird spot of wanting to read but not enjoying your books anymore, and that could be pretty hard to identify. And sometimes I feel like before we even realize that we're in a reading slump or having a bit of a brain fog episode, we usually tend to blame ourselves of not reading enough. So I want to get this straight out of the way and make sure you know when you're in a reading slump and when you need to stop blaming yourself for not reading fast enough. Some possible signs or symptoms that signify that you have been in a reading slump is that you haven't picked up a books in a long time, a pretty long time, couple of weeks, couple of months, which is not usual for you as a reader or somebody who's been reading for years. Another thing could be you keep starting books, you keep opening new books, but then you just cannot somehow finish them. And I know this can be a pretty controversial one, because I feel like being in the middle of multiple books can be a sign that you are reading and you're having a very healthy relationship with reading. But if it gets to like you being in the middle of 20 plus book or 10 plus books, 16 books, then I feel like you really need to step back, either put some discipline and put some boundaries in and making sure that you finish the books that you're reading, or it can be a possible sign that you are not feeling what you're reading and you're in a bit of a reading slump episode. I myself am in the middle of 5 books, but I feel like 5 books is a pretty good number. I feel like I am still able to finish book. I would say that I'm soft DNFing some of the books that I read. This can be a pretty shadowy, morally gray, in the muddy area point, the possible sign that I mentioned. So please check in with yourself and see if you're in a reading slump or you're just having one of those episodes where you just cannot find the right books for you, because those two things are different. The third sign is you feel guilty and you stop blaming yourself when you're not reading. This is what I mentioned going back to the first point that I mentioned, when before you realize that you're in a reading slump, you start to blame yourself and you start to feel guilty that why am I not finishing all the books, or why am I not reading fast enough, or why am I not just enjoying the books like I used to. And this can be a very big sign that your relationship with reading, there needs to be some work, some resolution, some reflection. The fourth sign, this can be once again in the muddy area, but I feel like on social media, if you feel like you are not consuming book talk content as much, or you're just like scrolling past book contents and you feel like you just don't want to see books on your social media feed, this could be a sign. This is a maybe in my opinion, because I am also in a bit of a weird episode with my social media and the book creators that I follow on social media. But this can also be a possible sign that can signal that you're having some sort of a weird issues with books around here. So maybe use this sign in combination with other signs to make sure you determine whether or not you're in a reading slump a bit more carefully and a bit more clearly. And the last sign is nothing is clicking, even the books from the authors or the types of genres that you know that you would typically enjoy, but now you just cannot seem to fall in love with them or be immersed in them. This can be a very big sign. So those are the signs that I feel like could be big indicators that you're having a bit of a difficulty in your reading journey and your reading routine with your books. But keep in mind that these signs can be very personal from person to person. These are the things that I myself have found other people to be experiencing also when they're in a reading slump. And some of these points I also experienced when I was in a reading slump, I think last month, end of July. That was very weird. But this is your reminder that this is normal. Being in a reading slump is normal. Having a brain fog episode is normal. Wanting to take a break from reading is normal. It doesn't mean that you're not a reader, or it doesn't mean that you're not a good enough reader. It just means that your brain just needs something different right now, and that's okay. So after we have identified some of the possible signs and possible symptoms to help you identify whether or not you're in a reading slump or not, the next step I want to talk about is how to gently ease out of a reading slump or ease out of a brain fog if you already have one. And these can be practical tips spanning from mindsets to actual tips and tricks to help get you started and help you ease out of a reading slump. The first step, as with everything else, is to acknowledge the slump. Acknowledge that this is a valid emotion. Acknowledge that this is a valid thing to be experiencing, and there's no shame or guilt in being in a reading slump. This is especially an important period for you to be reaffirming to yourself and reassuring to yourself your reader identity, and making sure that you know and you believe that being in a reading slump doesn't define you as a reader. Reading is a joy. It's not supposed to be something that feel obligatory and something that feel very rigid and very restrained. Sometimes just like saying out loud and acknowledging that you are in a reading slump can really help relieve some of the tension and bringing some of those emotions to the surface. And I feel like once you actually acknowledge the emotions, as with everything else, with like anxiety or panic attacks, that's when you can move a step forward and actually start resolving them. But until you actually acknowledge and allow yourself to feel those emotions, there's not going to be anything that you could do. So after you have acknowledged and befriended the emotion of being in a reading slump and feeling frustrated, the next step I would say either take a break or continue kind of immersing yourself even more. So these are two of the kind of opposing directions that I would recommend. So normally if you're feeling a bit tired and exhausted from reading, taking a break usually works, like doing a reading staycation, for example, where you just try to incorporate reading but also try to go about your day and doing other things, allowing reading to be something that's a very small part in your life, smaller part in your life than you would normally allow it to be. Forcing yourself to step away from reading entirely, that means like not reading your books, unfollowing certain booktubers and book content creators on social media for a while. That means going off of social media, doing a detox. Sometimes doing a detox is very fun. Or you could kind of push yourself and do exposure therapy, for example. Continue immersing yourself in even more books and even more reading hours, reading time, reading trips than you normally would. That means doing a 24-hour readathon or a 72-hour readathon, whatever that means for you. Either of these could work. They have both worked for me. And so depending on the type of person you are and depending on the need that you feel like you need in the moment, then either could work and really help either set your reading habits straight again or making sure that you find the book. Because maybe sometimes you being in a reading slump means that you haven't found the right books for you or the right genre for you, because at different points in life you might be craving a different genre Like for me, last week or these past 2 weeks, I've been on a fantasy kick. That means that I could not read other books except from the fantasy genre. Okay, after you've picked either doing a detox, meaning stepping away from social media, book content, or doing a complete exposure therapy episode with books and only books with either a certain genre or just like multiple genres, I feel like you need some more inspiration in your life. Sometimes what we do when we are in a reading slump, which is that we feel uninspired, we feel not interested, we don't feel like reading is something that is enjoyable anymore. And don't get me wrong, I feel like to a certain extent romanticizing the act of reading can be very beneficial, but I don't support when people go full-on capitalistic mode where they just consume just so many books at the same time. But sometimes a bit of romanticization is just what you need. Put in the extra work to make sure reading is something that's glamorized, that is romanticized, that looks very aesthetic, that feels very aesthetic, and that can mean going to the bookstore more, going to the library more, just immersing yourself in the book covers, just the world of books, the aesthetics of it all, revamping your reading corner, doing a makeover of your bookshelf, maybe switching out a lamp, adding a candle, or even just like switching out the case to your Kindle, your e-reader can also help as well, and that really helps with easing you out of a reading slump. Let's get to the very important part of today's episode, which is some of my book recommendations according to different genres that could help you get out of a reading slump. These are books that I feel like could be very interesting, could be very addicting, very page turning, something that could really hook you from the beginning. I have broken these books recommendations down into 5 genres. We have thriller / mystery / horror. These are books that could be very addicting, could make you feel weirded out, that could make you feel very, very glued to the page, but also one that could surprise you and make you feel like, oh, this is unexpected. The next category that I have is a romance book or rom-coms. I feel like sometimes going on a romance detox and just reading romance can be very good if you're in a reading slump. So these are the books that for serotonin, for emotional comfort, to make you feel like you're loved, to make you feel like life is good, and to inspire you once again. The next category is kind of muddy. I don't know what to call it, but I call it fiction. And this is a category for introspection, reflection. These are books that can be very easy to read and very comprehensible, but they still carry a deeper meaning and a deeper message that I feel like could really get you thinking and can really help you once again rethink your relationship with reading and just inspire you to think deeper about social events and social issues. The next category is fantasy, and this is purely for escapism, for once again complex world building, but not so very complex, and be immerse yourself in the magical, whimsical, very fantastical world, keeping you hooked and making you wonder. The final category is series, and hear me out. I know that when you're a reading slump, you're not supposed to be starting a brand new series, but I think some series, they have such a great first books that can really get you hooked and that can really get you started, get back into reading. This is in fact what I did when I first got back into reading. Being able to be in this world for a very long time, a specific world that the author created for a very long time, and befriending yourself with the characters, knowing the world building, the magic system, dragons, all of those stuff for a long time can really do wonders for your reading slump and your brain fog episodes. So for the first category, which is thriller / horror / mysteries, addicting, plot, weird books, most of the books that I have are very scary, but it's not in a very gruesome way. It's a very psychological, haunting way. The first book that I have is House of Leaves by Mark Danielewski, and I know this is a very hard one, and I don't think that this should be one that should be read by beginner. So even if you're in a reading slump and you're like have been reading for some time and you want something that's like scary but keeps you thinking and keeps you on your toe and makes you go down this very psychological rabbit hole, then this is the book for you. It's the weirdest book that I've ever read. The way it's structured, the way it's written, the text, and just it's a very weird book. Like just like look it up, but at the end you're gonna be thinking about your life, thinking about your existence. I was absolutely glued to the page and I just could not put it down. The next book, however, by the same author, Mark Danielewski, it could be a very easy read. This is The 50-Year Store, and I just finished this book in one of my readathons earlier. This I would say is for beginner, and this is a very easy read. It is a very short read. It's about like 200 or something pages, and it's also structured in a very weird way. It seems to be a fiction or a short stories or a novel, but the way that it's structured once again is very similar to a poem or an epic poem. Basically, in this story, we follow Chintana, which is a local seamstress, and she has been invited to this local Halloween party where she was assigned to be the chaperone for the 5 orphans at this Halloween party. And at midnight or something close to midnight, there's a storyteller coming to tell the stories to these orphans. The story that the storyteller chose to tell is of vengeance and twisted and just very dark and also very quite gruesome at the end as well. But I just feel like this is a story, once again, that is a representation of something. I cannot help but think that this is a metaphor for something. So once again, going on the theme of scaring you but making you think, this is the perfect book for both beginners, just like advanced reader or mid readers. And finally, this is the first Freida McFadden book that I read or listened to on Audible, and this is Never Lie. And I know this is a very controversial opinion and a very unpopular one, but I feel like this is not a bad book. And people on TikTok or social media, they have been bashing this book, but I feel like it's not bad. It actually scared me. I just could not help but wonder what's going on at the end, and the ending was absolutely wild, and I did not see that coming. So I would recommend listening to Never Lie just to amp up the vibes and the aesthetic and the atmosphere of it all. But Never Lie by Freida McFadden, I wouldn't say it's bad. Next, going on to romance rom-com. So I have a couple more recommendations because I've been reading a lot more romance recently. The first one that I would say is Say You Remember Me, and this is my first ever Abby Jimenez book, and I really enjoyed this. This is more of a long distance trope, and so this is the first book that I've read that's about a long distance relationship, and I really enjoyed it. He is a vet and she's a freelancer working for this marketing company. The reason why they have to do this long distance relationship is because her mother has dementia, and so she has to fly across the country going back to California to live with her mom to make sure that she's not doing something that harms herself. You know, there's a lot of mention about that, mental disorder, dementia. So if that's something that's triggering to you, I wouldn't recommend this book or reading this book at all, but it's a very good depiction of a healthy relationship, and I really enjoyed the depiction of masculinity in Xavier, the main male character, and just the way that they negotiate this relationship is very healthy and very respectable. Great Big Beautiful Life by Emily Henry. This is my first Emily Henry, and I really enjoyed it. The entire premise of this book is very, very unique. It is about 2 authors competing for the same role of writing the autobiography of this very famous actress, this famous princess who's living in the limelight, who's very famous basically, and everybody's been curious about her life after she went MIA and just went offline in the past 20 years. They basically lived somewhere close to each other, and they take turns interviewing this person, and they have a 1-month trial period, and at the end of that 1-month period they would have to each give their own draft or write-up of the autobiography, and that's when she would decide who to work with. Surprisingly thrilling, and surprisingly has a bit of a mystery plot at the end that I did not really see coming, but I really enjoyed that. I enjoyed learning about this person's story. I also enjoyed learning about the 2 characters' relationship, how it evolved. There's just a lot of layers to this book, and so the romance is not the only things that are being discussed. There are other topics being discussed, which I really, really enjoyed. The next thing that I would recommend you reading is Problematic Summer Romance by Ailey Hazelwood, and this is absolutely insane. I really enjoyed it. I gave it a 4.75 stars. Ailey Hazelwood has slowly and quickly and surely becoming one of my favorite authors of all time. This is the age gap trope. They have a pretty significant age gap of about, I think, 13 years apart. So if that's something that you're not comfortable with, then I wouldn't recommend. But I feel like the way that they communicate, even though at the beginning they did not communicate their feelings very well and they're not very mature, but at the end, in the way that you see kind of it progresses, is very much refreshing and very much healthy. She's like so sunshine, and he's also grumpy. I think there's a lot of tropes that are being used, not significantly, but hinted at. So we have the age gap trope, that's the main theme. We also have the miscommunication trope, kind of second chance romancy trope that I would say is second chance romance. Pretty long distance trope as well. some point during the relationship. So lots of tropes being mentioned. Because of that, it kind of depicts this very well-rounded relationship between two adults. The next recommendations in the romance category is a audiobook, and I really think you should listen to this book rather than read it. This is Only Lovers in the Building by Nadine Gonzalez, and I think this is so fun. This is such a summer romance, and this turns out not to be the thing that I expected. This is about two people living in the same building. She is a corporate lawyer who just quit her job, and she decided to spend 3 months in Miami trying to figure things out because she didn't know if she wanted to find another job. And that's where she met this very hot, sexy bartender. But he's not only a bartender, he's also a poet, a writer, a translator. And sometimes throughout the summer, they decided to start a book club, a 2-person book club, mind you, and also start writing reviews on an app called Booktube, which is similar to Fable. And that's when things kind of blew up, and at the end somehow they had their own podcast and a book deal. So that's a very fun premise. Next category that we're going to be talking about is fiction, and this is for, once again, introspection, reflection, thinking deeper into society, but still very easy to read. The first one that I have for you is Exit West, and this is a book that has magical realism aspects of it. This is talking about two people living in the Middle East, some country in the Middle East, which don't know which country it is. They just recently had to kind of negotiate and debate between staying in their home country or moving or migrating, if you will, to another country, because their home country has been suffering from a lot of bombings and wars. And we follow them kind of through this journey of migrating, literally and metaphorically, through time and through space, but also changing their relationship, evolving as a person, negotiating relationship. And this book is one of those books that really challenges the definition of love, because at the end they're not romantic lovers anymore, but one would say that they are more platonic and even familial lovers. The next book is the book Censor's Library, and this is very emotional. This is somewhat dystopian, but I would say it's more of a mix between dystopian and folklore. There's a lot of influence of magic, fantasy, a bit of folklore, and like I mentioned, fairy tale in this book. We follow a book censor's journey whose job is to ban books and censor books, but throughout the way he just commits to something that is not allowed, which is loving books and loving reading and loving language. And that's when he feels like he has to join the rebellious movements against the act of banning books and censoring books. It makes me think a lot about just like banning books, and I feel like this is one of the very important books to read at this day and age where books are being banned at such a rapid rate, and the entire metaphor for it is drawn from Alice in Wonderland. The Witches of New York also is a very great read, and it makes me think a lot about feminism, the role of women in society, those Salem's witch trials, and how there's a deeper and more discriminatory meaning under the term witch, or the witch trials, witchcraft in general, and how that could be a very sexist and misogynistic term. This book is set place in New York in the spring of 1880. We have 4 characters, but the story is told from Beatrix June's perspective. She is just an ordinary girl growing up from the outskirts of New York, and when she turned 18, she decided to go into the city, to go downtown New York to find a job. And she found a job at this tea and sympathy shop, and she didn't know that the owners of this tea and sympathy shop are actually witches. Next is a classic, and that is Anne of Green Gables, and this is such a comforting, magical, whimsical read, but also it has a lot of mentions about sexism, feminism, the patriarchy. What does it mean to be a girl in an orphanage, and what does that mean when it comes to your adoptability, if that makes sense? Because Anne of Green Gables, or Anne, she first got adopted because the foster parents thought that she was a boy, and turns out she's not a boy, she's a girl. They still decided to adopt her, but at the beginning that was some sort of a conflict that they were each negotiating, and she keeps pushing back and voicing her opinions about why can't I be adopted when I'm a girl, things like that. So negotiating that. Last but not least, The Little Liar by Mitch Albom. This is a surprisingly easy read. This is about the Nazi invasion in Greece, and we follow Nico, which is a 10-year-old boy who got lost and got separated from his family, but then he was tasked with this very interesting assignment of persuading the Jewish community or the Jewish people to board on this train that is supposedly going to Poland and to provide them with a new life and new jobs and new security, but turns out they are actually being transported to concentration camps. And so he has to navigate and grapple with the feelings of his action, the consequences of his action. The way that the story is narrated is also very interesting because Truth is the person who's narrating and telling the story, and so the personification of Truth is very important. It's a very quick read, under 300 pages, but I feel like Mitch Albom has been able to capture the entire scope of the struggle of Jewish people and the Jewish community, but also the ethnic erasure of Judaism. Okay, moving on to fantasy. This is for escapism, wonder, fantasy, whimsical, those fun stuff. And the first book that I have recommending to you is Blood for Brighthaven by Emma Wang. This is absolutely amazing. I really enjoy this, and when I was making this list, I was thinking of recommending to you the Sword of Kaigen, but I feel like Sword of Kaigen is a bit too complicated and too complex, and I feel like it's a bit more gruesome. And this book is especially interesting because the magic system is very much an integral and essential part of the entire story and the plot. We follow Siona, a female person living in a very sexist and misogynistic patriarchy. Her only mission is trying to study as hard as possible, work as hard as possible to become a female high mage, which is out of the question because females in this society are not allowed to do anything except nursing and housing and just doing household and also reproducing. She is the only woman in history to ever make it to become the female high mage. Because of that, when she moves to the Majesty Center, her workplace, the only gender that she is surrounded with is her male counterpart. And so it's a very, very male-dominated society. She's the only person voicing her own experiences, struggling her own struggles. And then as she kind of goes through her life of doing her work and continuing doing research and doing magic, she figured out a very dark and twisted lie about their magic system, about their world, about the entire society and civilization that she lives in. It's a complete lie, and the way that it's unfolded is very much tragic and very much, I would say, heartbreaking, but also beautiful because you see how big of an impact she could make even as the first female high mage in history. The next book, which is an arc that I recently read, and that is the Book of Lost Hours. And this book is very beautiful. It is a very easy entry point to fantasy as a genre. So if you're a beginner to fantasy, this is where I think you should start. This is talking about this concept of time traveling, different dimensions, negotiating the fine line between erasing the past, changing the future, talking about a place called the time space. And it is a third dimension where memories are stored in the forms of books. And so people like the timekeepers who can access this place, they can actually remove, they can add, they can change, they can eradicate the memories by ripping out a page from the book or adding a page to the book, and that could completely change the course of history. In this world, in society, each country, so it's very similar, the world is very similar to the world that we live in. Each country has their own little timekeeper organization. What they do is that they would each go into this time space, and whatever the country perception and how they want the world to perceive them, the timekeepers would then adjust the memories to make sure that that is the outcome that they want. So for example, if America wants the world to perceive them to be very superior, very pure, very righteous, then the timekeepers can go back to history and then just like delete the other memories that counter with that perception that they want to be perceived at. So that's a very interesting concept. Next, the secret book history. This is very much atmospheric, very whimsical, but also surprisingly heartbreaking. This is set in the Victorian era. Mentions that is being drawn from Jane Austen books, Jane Eyre, lots of classics being mentioned. So if you're a classic person, this is a perfect way to start. This is talking about the society of women. Females are not supposed to voice their opinion. They're not supposed to have their own agency. They're not supposed to do anything. Coming down to the books they read, every book that they read has to be about nursing, the household, all of those very traditionally feminine traits. But when they decide to read other things like Jane Eyre or Jane Austen, where women are encouraged to have their own thoughts and agency, they're banned, and the men in their life don't allow them to read those books. The women from all of those oppressing and oppressive situations, they gather together and they have their your own little secret book society. This book society is more of just discussing the books they read. It starts out as that, but it evolves to become more of a sisterhood, found family, and just this connection between females that are so empowering and so fascinating and very much tight-knit, that I really appreciate that. And it's just like amazing to see how these women can actually start to take back their own control and have agency over their life and be able to decide for themselves what they want to read, first of all, but then eventually how they want to become and who they want to become. Last category that we have on today's episode is the series. The first series that got me back into reading actually is the Book of Azrael and the entire Gods and Monsters series, and the fourth book is coming out I think in November or October, so this is the perfect time to get started with this series. There are 3 books out. I think this is going to be a 5-book series, so a bit of a waiting time still to be done, but I think it's absolutely worth it. This is my God tier series, 6 stars. Every single book is amazing. It gets better and better every time. The entire world building is absolutely insane. It's just so much politics, so much character development, so much growth. Oh my god, the people in this book are just amazing. They are flawed, don't get me wrong, but they are choosing to evolve to become better people at the end of the day, and the way that they negotiate the relationship that they evolve from, it's just beautiful. This is a slightly easier series than the Gods and Monsters and the Book of Azrael, and this is the Trial of the Sun Queen or the Artifacts of Ouranos series. This is a 4-part completed series. If you can get the audiobooks of this series, please do. It is quite spicy though. If you don't want to listen to people doing spicy stuff, then maybe read it. The slowest romance I've ever read. Like, I kid you not, they did not do the deed until book 3. And there are 4 books. We follow Lore, and she is a mortal, or she believes herself to be a mortal. And when she was very young, she was thrown into this abusive prison called Nostraza, one of the most, if not the most dangerous prisons in this realm of Ouranos. Her entire life, like 10 plus years of her childhood, is spent in this very exploitative, abusive environment where she doesn't even have a proper bar of soap to begin with to shower, but thankfully she has her own siblings in there with her, or unfortunately. So there are Lore and there are Willow and Tristan, so they're siblings. One day she got into trouble and she was sentenced to a place called the Hollow. And the Hollow is this kind of very mysterious, dangerous forest where dark creatures can roam the earth and they could kill you, they could tear you apart. Nobody cares when you're in the Hollow. There's no protection, no food, no water, no hygiene, nothing. Very, very dangerous situation. And she was sentenced to 2 weeks there, which is the longest period of time ever. But then one day she woke up and she realized that she's not in Nostraza anymore. And in fact, she's in the neighboring country of Aphelion. She also realized that she has been kidnapped by the Sun King. And so Aphelion is the country where the Sun King rules. The reason why she's been kidnapped is that there's this trial of the Sun Queen that she is semi-forced to participate in. And so whoever wins this trial of the Sun Queen will marry the Sun King. But then turns out everybody has secrets, so nobody knows who that person is. She even has secrets herself, and she then got tangled into this very, very messy political situation with other kings and other queens of this realm of Ouranos. Okay, the next series that I want to recommend to you is a maybe, because I enjoy the series for the plot and I think it's a very interesting series. I think it is a completed series. There are 4 books and the 4th book just came out, and this is the City of Gods and Monsters. I enjoyed the first book. I read the first book. I don't like the female main character. I think she's absolutely either dumb or annoying. I don't like her. The main male character, I think he's arrogant. He doesn't give a shit. He's just full of himself. He's like just so egotistical, egocentric, I don't know. But the plot is very interesting. And originally I thought I'm gonna DNF the series, but now after hearing people read the 4th book and saying how worth it is, I'm like, should I go back to the series? So I do recommend the first book for the sake of the plot. I don't recommend reading it for the couple because they're absolutely annoying. I don't like her for one bit. I don't like him for one bit. They're just, and then seeing if you want to continue with the series or not. And then the last series and the last book that I recommend in this video is gonna be The Games Gods Play by Abigail Owen. And this is so fun. This is like Greek mythology inspired, Hunger Games-esque with deadly trials. The love interest is Hades, the king of the underworld or the god of death. Up until the midway part of the book, everything is just slow. And I also don't like the FMC that much. I think she's kind of full of herself, kind of overly optimistic about her abilities, and she's a bit too perfect in my opinion. But after the halfway mark, it is absolutely addicting and everything just like go wild, like shit hits the fan. The found family is surprisingly beautiful. I really enjoyed their relationship. I did cry, I did shed some tears throughout the books because there's this one character that I did not see dead, but then he's dead. The second book is coming out later this year, I think. It's just like full-on vibes, aesthetic, and just good time. Okay, so that's everything from me. One thing that I would like to mention to you before we close out this video is that reading slumps are parts of being a reader. Just like season, just like moods, there's no timeline, no reading goals that matter more than your peace and your enjoyment. So allow yourself to feel all these emotions. Know that being in a reading slump is not a bad thing. It's not something that defines you as a reader. It's not something that you should base your worth on as a reader. But I think sometimes reading slump can be a very important period for you to rekindle with your books, re-question your reading habits, doing something fun, doing something new with your reading journey. And I think that could really help you grow as a reader, and just like your relationship with books is gonna develop 10 times better after you be in a reading slump. Trust me. So that's all from me. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being here. I hope you found this video helpful. I had so much fun talking about books and recommending books to you that I love, that you also hopefully may love. Let me know if you are in a reading slump and how's that going. If you want to read any of the books that I mentioned, hopefully one book will help you get out of a reading slump gently and just with lots of love. No shame, no guilt, no pressure. Do not rush it. Do not pressure yourself into trying to get out of it immediately. It's not gonna work that way. If you like this video and found this helpful, then please comment down below, give me a subscribe, give me a follow, give me a like, give me a share. If you want to support my channel, you can buy me a book, buy me a coffee, buy me a matcha using my Ko-fi linked in the description. Thank you for supporting me. Thank you for watching. As always, it's absolutely amazing for me to be able to do this and talk about books and turn my hobby into an actual thing that I could share with people. Once again, thank you for listening. I hope you have an amazing weekend, amazing day, night, afternoon, evening, wherever you are in the world. Please take care of yourself and please make time to read, even if you have a very busy schedule. Happy reading. I'm gonna see you very soon with an episode, and until then, bye bye. Oh my god.